Welcome back to Banfield. Up to 200 U.S. citizens are still stranded in Afghanistan tonight, and tens of thousands of Afghans who helped us during the 20-year conflict are also stranded. That's a frightening prospect, but even worse, the Taliban could be using United States-built equipment to hunt them down. Since 2007, U.S. forces have been collecting biometric data. That's fingerprinting, retina scans, and other identifiers of every single Afghan working with the U.S. and its ally nations. Every member of the Afghan military, every member of the Afghan police, and civilian workers, too. The same biometric toolkits were also used during their elections. So if you voted, you got scanned. There were 7,000 little handheld devices there, and now nobody knows how many of those devices were left behind. And while the United States military had time to disable the helicopters and the airplanes they left behind, those biometric devices may still be working. So might the big databases. I'm joined by Conor Powell. He is the former Fox News bureau chief in Afghanistan. He spent years in Kabul. He was embedded with U.S. and Afghan forces during major military operations in Helmand and Kandahar provinces. Conor, did you ever see those devices in operation? Did you see those scannings happening while you were embedded?
I sure did. I actually saw it happening in Kandahar several different times. The military was using it not only to scan workers who were connected to the government or to ISAF and the military, but really anytime they saw a young male who was suspicious, sometimes they were 7, 8-year-old boys, they were scanning them, putting them into a database. You know, Afghanistan is a country that we often describe as being war-torn or primitive, backwards, developing, but this was actually probably the most state-of-the-art system in the world, and it was doing a lot to actually reduce corruption and fraud and a lot of the other problems that had really plagued the country. I was actually enrolled in one of these systems. The military, when I first got there in 2009, in order to get onto a U.S. base, made you give biometric data. Now, I have no idea where that information ended up, but it is concerning, and I think it highlights the fact of just how poorly planned this entire withdrawal was. You know, the key is whether or not the Taliban have access to the database. It's not clear that they do. They certainly have access to the handheld devices, which hold a little bit of information, but the database is the real key. But it just shows you that the Biden administration didn't do much to plan.
Yeah, let me jump in there because I want the viewers to know exactly what the circumstances are. Originally, the Americans used these devices to, figure out who the dangerous people were, the car bombers and the prisoners, et cetera. So this was a great idea. Then it expanded to know who all the Afghans were and who was safe and who wasn't. But then there was another series of devices, and this was something called the APPS system, which was used to register all military and all police, and that's in the hands of the Afghans, and that might be the concerning data, because the Americans now are saying all that other stuff, all those civilians, all that data is actually in servers in the U.S. So it's not something the Taliban physically have their hands on. But, hacking, hello, is global. And again, like you said, the Taliban are not as primitive as you think they are. Half of them may not be able to read, but the other half sure know a thing or two about the internet. So to that end, talk to me a little bit about what happens now for these Afghans who now are going to try to escape. They're going to be out on the street, and they're going to try to go maybe to an airport or a bus station or a train station or maybe, across a border. And they could have their irises scanned and be condemned on the spot.
That's 100% a real concern. This is one of the many concerns that any Afghan who worked with the coalition, who lean towards the Western world as opposed to lean towards the Taliban. This is one of many ways in which the Taliban can essentially track you down. People have pictures of their letters that they got from working with the government on their phone. There might be English emails or text messages. There's also this database and these devices. So there are lots of ways for the Taliban to essentially hunt down anyone who they deem a threat to their government, to their new institutions. And so this is a concern that is, sort of part and parcel for every Afghan that the United States and the international community has abandoned there. They have this concern about anything that might lead the Taliban to their doorstep. And what we are already seeing right now in the Taliban are recriminations and attacks on people who worked with the Western governments, who worked with the military, and who tried to help bring peace and stability to the country.
So I'm going to just read quickly something that I saw that was a comment to MIT Technology Review, an excellent article on this actual crisis of technology in the country. And this is what the Defense Department said to that outlet. The U.S. has taken prudent actions to ensure that sensitive data does not fall in the Taliban's hands. This data is not at risk of misuse. But there are loads of Taliban sympathizers. You know, there are loads of people who may have spirited some of that information in a way. And of course, there's this issue with hacking. And to be clear, Conor, this isn't just name and address. This is detail, like 30 to 40 points of data per person, including what's your favorite fruit, what's your favorite vegetable, what's your father's name, your uncle's name, your cousin's names. I mean, it is a massive, massive identifying piece of data for these people.
That's true. And one of the things that, I think we need to talk more about what's going on in Afghanistan right now is the group that has their hands on this, which is the Haqqani network, which is the Al-Qaeda affiliated part of the Taliban. They are also deeply tied to the Pakistani ISI, which is a very sophisticated intelligence service. So if they are hackers in the region, the Taliban, through the Haqqani network with their connections to the Pakistani ISI, they're going to be connected to these types of hackers who can possibly get to some of this information. And maybe this isn't the only database that is a worry or the only piece of equipment. There are other documents in that in the government, buildings that could be possibly used against Afghan citizens. It's just one of many concerns, but it's a big concern because the Taliban, they are not primitive. They are not, some backwards insurgency. They do have some sophistication, and more importantly, they have ties to sophisticated intelligence services like the Pakistani ISI, which has long supported them.
So now, and I only have about 30 seconds left, but it is important to just highlight what you just said. The ISI is the Pakistani Intelligence Services, and there are loads of reports that say it is the ISI helping to oversee these door-to-door searches to find these people, which means the United States ally, Pakistan, is helping the United States enemy, Taliban, to find the United States helpers, the Afghans. I mean, there is a whole global issue to this. It is very troubling.
Ashleigh, that's the 20-year war right there. I mean, that is, you just summed up what the fundamental problem with the entire U.S. effort in Afghanistan was, which is we were fighting an enemy in which was being supported by a so-called U.S. ally in Pakistan. And they undermined from Pakistan, from Islamabad, from the SWAT and the rural areas of Pakistan, they undermined any effort the United States and the international community made in Afghanistan. That's the fundamental problem of the failure of the war there.
And they called this identity dominance. When the Americans started it out, it was the identity dominance. I do want to say that Eagle Base, a heavily fortified CIA base in Kabul, was destroyed. This was some of the explosions heard around Kabul last week. This was a controlled explosion to get rid of data that was in that extraordinary base. But who knows if any of that data is what we're talking about right now or if it existed elsewhere. Conor Powell, thank you. Thank you for your guidance on this. It's a very important issue. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.